Thanks,
Stage
Sean.
is yours. Oops, I'm sorry.
I have to thank the sponsor for my show, Bolton Mech. So thanks for the great hat. And thanks for having me here in North Dakota. I actually grew up 3 degrees south latitude from here. So you'll hear me say the word y'all a lot because I'm Southern. Just a joke. I actually live in North Carolina now, in Asheville, North Carolina. And in Asheville, we're known for the Blue Ridge Mountains. We're known for the scenery. We're known for the bluegrass music, the beer. We have 40 breweries. We're only 90,000 people. We drink a lot. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little place. Well, Asheville didn't grow up this way. This is a shot of Asheville from the 1980s, 1990s. It was dead as a doornail. We just left these buildings fallow, and basically we hit the Depression in 1930 and stayed pretty much vacant for 50 years. This is a shot of downtown Asheville from not too long ago, 1995. This is our attitude about our downtown. That won't work here. We're not urban, we're not Chicago, we're not Charleston, this isn't who we are. And I worked for this guy's real estate development company. This is Julian Price. He basically put $15 million into a for-profit real estate development company. And what we were doing was fixing buildings with 75% of the money, and 25% we would seed entrepreneurs and basically grow wealth at the ground floor and help people start businesses. We had the first vegetarian restaurant downtown, a nightclub, one of the top 5 nightclubs in the entire country, but it was mostly a strategy about making housing. So this is one of our buildings before and after. Real rocket science. It's basically taking an old hotel and turning it into housing. But what we were seeing was this attitude about how cities grew and what their people's perceptions were. And we weren't looking at data of what was happening at the city. We were talking about how we felt, what kind of emotional responses were, but people didn't understand what our downtowns were doing in the community. So we talk about it. One of the things that we kind of got onto real quickly was looking at land like, sorry, I gotta take my hat off. It's hard to see with the lights on. Looking at the downtown is a crop. Your buildings are like a crop in your city. The city is like essentially a big farm. When you talk to farmers about land, they talk about it in economic terms. So this is one of our buildings that we rehabbed. Ground floor retail, second floor office, upper stories residential. We took this building from $300,000 and grew it to $11 million. What the city did is they subsidized us with this streetscape, and they put in a sidewalk, a garbage can, 2 benches, and a street tree. So thank you, city, for that subsidy at our front door, right? We took this building and increased the taxes 3,500%. Do y'all have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? Wouldn't you like that? Go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. So this is building our community's wealth. But again, these biases that people have, like, Joe, that's cute, that's great, $11 million. We've got this Walmart at $20 million. So fair enough, sorry. $20 million is more than $11 million, right? But when you think about the crop that we took, our city, we've consumed 0.2 acres, they've consumed 34. So that's an apples and oranges way of looking at real estate development, right? 2 totally different animals. So let's be fair about it and look at the productivity. So per acre, we're producing 100 times more property taxes than they are per acre, right? We're producing double the retail taxes. Who would think that a furniture store, a beauty salon, and a tattoo parlor is double the productivity of a Walmart? But it is. Look at the data. We've got more residents, they don't have any, and we also have more jobs. So if you look at the data of what you're doing on Main Street, it shows the wealth that you're building for your community, right? So if you could grow a crop, I was presenting this in Oregon. I said, what do you want to do? You want to grow marijuana or you want to grow wheat? It's a cash crop. You can laugh at this. It's a joke. You know, it's like, how do we understand this with crops? Why don't we understand this with our buildings? Why don't we talk about the quality of place and what you're building for economics? And I want you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. This is 5th grade math. We do this with cars, right? We don't talk about cars on a miles per tank basis, do we? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank. You'd understand how ridiculous that is if I were to say, look, my truck is 650 miles per tank. But instead we say miles per gallon. The numbers just changed, and we should all be driving BMW Isettas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to your Prius owners, but a 1955 car is actually more efficient, right? We're doing this for a $3 commodity. So you should be doing this for your $30,000 or $3 million piece of land. Understand the productivity of it. In 2009, I first started presenting this. I presented at a Smart Growth Conference, and I'll just do this in here. Show of hands, who in this room understands how property tax assessment works and how the assessment methodology is put down on a piece of property, and how TIF works and all that. Just show of hands. So probably about like, I'd say about 10% of the audience. I was standing in front of a bunch of planners, greenway specialists, affordable housing specialists. Not one person raised their hand in Seattle when I presented this. And I love this quote from Mark Twain: "A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read." If we're not reading this stuff, if we don't understand this stuff, we're functionally illiterate on how cities operate. It's really simple when you have a property tax system. If you have a property tax value system, there's a perverse incentive to build junk in your community, right? The less value you build on the property, the lower the taxes. It's that simple. So we need to understand why taxes pay for stuff if we're going to build our community and maintain our community's wealth. So let's go through some examples about how taxes pay for stuff. This is our value of our downtown. So we're a $15 million investor sitting in a, sitting in a $100 million downtown, right? We didn't get a new building in our downtown until 2008. So what you see there, that step in value was because of uncovering those upper stories and allowing them to become active, right? All that wealth was sitting there. Now, to show you that it's not all love and roses in Asheville, this is one of my favorite people. This is Chris Peterson, who's an activist in the community. These are actually his campaign ads from the 1990s complaining about downtown investment. Y'all have people like Chris complain about downtown streetscapes environments? I like this, downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewer, streets for our citizens. Y'all have people like that? $26 million of investment on the downtown. So let's do some math here. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset and it grows to $500 million, is investing 26 and yielding $400 million a good return on investment? Yeah. Just put the math out there, and guess what? You're not going to win Chris over. Chris is looking at this religiously or something. Like Chris has, this is our downtown now, it's worth $1 billion or $1.2 billion. Chris has websites with fire and brimstone. This is the mayor getting hit in the head with a lightning bolt. I asked the mayor, I said, "Mayor, is that a liquor drink?" She goes, "It should be." You know, Chris is gonna operate with his own MO, that's fine. You have to put the information out there for the rest of the community. Incidentally, he misspelled charlatans on the slide. Anyway, put that aside. So what we need to understand about our cities as that crop or as that farm is that it is a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. If we're a $15 million real estate developer, what is my city? What is your city? What's your city worth? What's your town worth? And we need to understand that because this is straight out of Oxford American Dictionary, the word incorporate. The incorporate means to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So by law, your city's incorporated, your county's incorporated, your state's incorporated, our country's incorporated. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show in 2016 when he was still vice president. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. I'm such a nerd, I looked it up at midnight. There's the US code that lists us as a federal corporation. So for any attorneys in the room, check out the law. It's not to say that we're a capitalist corporation. We're essentially a social corporation. We have to work together to pay for streets and pipes and everything else, right? So we have to understand the math of this. My city, at $14 billion of taxable value, is 7 times the value of Ted Turner. Do y'all think Ted Turner wakes up every day and thinks about what's on Facebook and what's trending on Twitter? Of course not. He's looking at the data of shows, what people are watching stuff, how they're responding to things. We have to do the same things with cities. So one of the projects I was talking with the governor about is this is a project we did in 2009. This is a mixed-use project. It was a surface parking lot with a hot dog joint on it. Wasn't the greatest use. We were approached by hotel developers to buy it, and eventually a loft project came in. This is nothing to write home about. You see these surface parking lots around your community. We knew what the cash flow was because we're renting out parking spaces. So we came up with this idea of doing a mixed-use project, doing a public parking garage, wrapping it with taxes. And what I'm showing you is a State of the Downtown address that I did in 2019 when I was on the board of directors for our downtown association to basically show our city what resulted in this. When we did the project, it was, it wasn't fair to deliver a legal document to our elected officials that was 68 pages long to do a condo with the city. Is that fair? Let's do something as simple as a cartoon. We made a little cartoon model of what's non-taxable is in green and what's taxable is in orange and blue. So we're the orange stuff, the housing, and the hotel is the blue stuff. As we went through this process, this is how we got treated in the newspaper as some fat cat developer. Incidentally, this was the independent magazine that we helped found in our community. So sometimes you have to take the lumps, you just kind of move on. But what was crazy is talking with my friends who are on the city staff. One of my friends, Sasha Verchinsky, is a city planner, and she said to me, I'm not making this up, she goes, Joe, it only took 4 years to get the city to sign the contract. And I was like, really? It's in the downtown master plan right there to do this on our property. There's the city's transit plan to do it on our property. We didn't need to do this. We're following your plan, and it took 4 years. And so I said to Sasha, Sasha, do you know how many human beings my wife and I could produce in 4 years? 5. We could make 5 people. And she's like, oh. When you work with developers, you need to understand that that clock is ticking. We had to lay people off because we didn't have cash flow. We can't just sit around and wait for happiness to happen. It's just not gonna work. So we have to work together on this stuff. So incidentally, there it is, 3/4 of the way built right there. We're still gonna get a 3rd building sitting on the top of the parking garage here. But in 2009, this is what we paid in property taxes, and here we are 10 years later, so that's a 3,000% increase in taxes. Or I like to show pictures. This is what we paid in taxes before and what it's paying in 2019. We could have just sold this land to the hotel developer and walked away. We could have put our money into downtown real estate, which is the gray bar there, and doubled our money, or we could have just put it in NASDAQ and tripled our money. We didn't need to do this. When you talk with developers, you gotta realize we don't need to do things certain ways. If you make it difficult for us, it's gonna be harder for us to get the project built. We wanted to help our community see the wealth opportunity. This is what my community got out of it. Actually, the line keeps going. Do you think this is a good return on investment? I think it is. This is our opportunity of growing our community's wealth, which is what we're trying to do, so we can all have better things together. When you make the awful stuff easier to do, you get more of the awful stuff. It's easy for me to just go out into the edge of the community and just build a big surface parking lot and call it a day. I can turn that stuff over all day long and make plenty of money and harm my community. Why do we make this stuff hard to do? So it's been 10 years since we did that project. My city hasn't done another one. That's been kind of heartbreaking. We've been going around the country and doing different tax analyses, and this is the lesson for y'all on Main Street. For every $1 of county tax somebody out in the county is paying in single family per acre, their brother and sister in the city is paying about 5 times that to the same county. Remember, we're all county taxpayers. This is the Walmart, this is the mall, that's a 2-story building, a 3-story building, and a 6-story building. This could be Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or Dallas. As soon as you start stacking those stories, you're stacking your wealth. Y'all follow me? If you do this math in your community, you'll see the same results. So just normalize things to a per acre analysis, and you'll see that wealth production in your community. Incidentally, some people say to me when they see that chart, they're like, dude, you just hate Walmart. If that's your takeaway, you're missing the point. I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers Conference. Any tax assessors in the room? Okay. Not the most dynamic conference on the planet. The Assessors Conference, great people, they're all mathletes. It makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man. It's like the squarest conference ever. Super awesome people. This guy gets up and presents at 8 in the morning and did this unbelievable presentation in Kansas City about how cheap Walmarts are. Let that wash over you for a second. 3,000 assessors in one room, and this guy is proving his buildings are junk, right? If you have a tax value system, there's a benefit for him to do that. The lower the value, the less taxes he pays. I'm in the back of the room drinking my coffee thinking, this is brilliant. This guy's getting all of his property taxes lowered in one meeting. That's efficient. Now, trained as an architect, I'm having a coronary because I'm like, why don't the assessors care? Now, it's not that the assessors don't care. It's just that they have a job to find value. And if it's a junky building, it's low value, period. They didn't create the tax system. So I went up to the microphone and I asked Mr. Terrell, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he shot back 15, 20 years. We designed the building to depreciate as fast as possible. We'll build another building to depreciate it down again. We don't care about the buildings, they're throwaway. Is that what you want? Is that the commitment to your corporation that you need? Is that the relationship you want to have in your community? That's the life cycle of a cat. We at least mourn the passing of a cat. Sorry to cat people, I'm a dog person. This is their commitment to your corporation. Do the math on it and say, is this a good deal for my community? The average Walmart consumes more in police services than it pays in property taxes. They're not going to hide that. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Understand the tax system and how it affects your community. Is this all too depressing for y'all? Is this all right? So I would argue that people don't see this is because of the way the information is presented, and we're not having the conversation based off the data. We're having biased conversations based on the way we've always done things. So one of the things that we try to do in our work is try to find different ways to visualize this. So could you imagine if you go to your doctor, they're going to do an MRI scan of your brain, and you're going to see information. What's green up there is your creative thought process. What's blue is your brainstem activity. I can look into your head with technology and see information. So could we do the same thing with your community? So let's talk about my community first. This is my county. This is Buncombe County. This is typically the way that people talk about real estate. We have gray is non-taxable. So you see the big gray pad up there. That's Mount Mitchell. That's the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi. Low value in green, high value in purple right here. So that's the Biltmore estate. That's America's largest house. That one house is worth $100 million. Y'all got a $100 million house around here? No. But the house is 8,000 acres of land with a 180,000 square foot house on it. So it's like having the biggest gas tank. Of course it's going to be worth a lot of money. So rather than total value, here's value per acre. I'll just show it to you in 3D. Anybody want to guess where downtown Asheville might possibly be in this model? Now in my town, I've got 2 voters out in the county for every 1 voter in the city. We have a lot of ex-urban development outside the city limits. We never win politically. Actually, one of our state legislators called us a cesspool of sin when I was on the Downtown Association. This is the South. This is how we operate, I guess. And we were really serious. We're like, did Senator Forrester mean it? He doubled down when we sent a reporter to go talk to him. He goes, I don't mean the good people of Buncombe County. It's just that downtown part. That's where the weirdos in the cesspool is. We threw a street party. We actually got beer trucks to come in, and we all wore water wings and danced like we were in a pool. It's the South. Anyway, for my friends that live out here in Fairview, they honestly think they pay a lot of taxes, right? Because their relative point of view might be their cousins live out here in Hickory Nut Gap. They don't know what we're paying in downtown and county taxes. So in their defense, show it to them. So we showed this to our county, and we said, look, you need to feed the golden goose. We'll keep on giving you more money, but you can't just starve your downtown. So we have to show this information so they understand it. And I would advocate, you all have to do this and make your case. Invite your county in, talk to Cass County for those of us that are in here to see that. And again, biases. People like, well, Joe, that's North Carolina, we're different. Here's Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri. Can y'all tell where downtown is? This is Manchester, New Hampshire. You want to guess where downtown is? This is Bozeman, Montana. Guess where downtown is? Notice how the suburban environment produces very little wealth. It may be the new stuff, but is it productive? This is Brevard, North Carolina. This is a community of 7,000 people up in the mountains. This is an awesome little town. You can see where downtown is. We'll come back to them in a second. This is all, I couldn't resist this joke. Chuck used it earlier. I'm just going to tweak it a little bit. This is all spatial analysis. This joke might not work for people under the age of 35, but everybody older than it, sorry. So back to smaller communities. This is a pattern that's replicable. You've probably seen this now. So let's go back to Brevard. Brevard is pretty much like Mayberry. It hasn't changed from this postcard. The mayor goes by the name Mayor Jimmy. He's been mayor for 35 years. He works in the hardware store right next to City Hall. He's super awesome. And we did their model, and there it is. And he was so funny. His response was this. He goes, well, I can tell where downtown is. That's kind of cool. And he goes, but we're doing this stormwater thing. Can we do this for stormwater? We said, sure. So he's being hit by the state to do a stormwater cleanup because they're dumping their stormwater into a trout stream, which is unbelievably dumb. But they never had the money to build a stormwater system. So he wants to find a more fair way of understanding stormwater. So we turned their tax system into a monochrome, and then we went ahead and did their stormwater, and there it is. So taking this like a Jello mold and dropping it on their tax system, you can see that downtown is indeed impervious. But notice how the taxes come through. But as you go out the highway, you can see all the impervious surface on the strip, where the big boxes are, the big parking lots. They're mountain people, so we did a little mountain profile to show them this. This is their taxes. Here's their stormwater runoff. So this is the problem. When you have a lot of stormwater and very little taxes, this part's okay right here. So if you look at the downtown, well now, you can see that you've got a variability here. The real problem is when you go out here to where the Walmart, the Home Depot, and the Kmart is. You can see all of this runoff and very little taxes. So no matter what you do, you're just not gonna get the money back to pay for that stormwater system. So you might wanna do 2 different stormwater fees in this situation. Again, don't overthink this stuff. Even in small communities, rethink the way that you're looking at your infrastructure. Pair it with revenue in the physical environment because it's all connected. So not all impervious surfaces are created equal. You know, I was talking with Sean about this. He's like, you need to understand North Dakota, that it's not just Fargo or Bismarck, it's lots of little towns. And how do you make this understandable in a small place? The easiest thing I could think of is think of your communities as a form of DNA. They're just basically places for people, right? So this is how I started my life when I was 3 months old, when I had hair. I have a DNA in my body. I'm genetically Italian, I can't change that. I wave my hands around when I talk fast. That's who I am. I'm gonna be my grandfather whether I like it or not. This is my path, right? You all do this with your family members, or more importantly, again, when I had hair, these are my parents. I'm genetically Italian. We also suffer from a genetic predisposition to heart disease. I should not have eaten that Philly cheesesteak today. You know, I shouldn't have eaten the cheese curds last night. This is gonna be a problem for me. I know this in my body. Cities and towns are the same way. Look to the bigger cities and towns and learn from their heart attack. West Fargo should be learning from Fargo. Kindred should be learning from Castleton. These are places that are next steps up on the DNA that are all transferable. All of these lessons are transferable. And even Kindred could even look at Fargo if it wants and talk to people in Fargo. What would you do differently with small growth? So be aware of this pattern of looking to your relatives. Look at other cities. So retail, we didn't have your retail data, but I just want to show you a quick retail example. Colorado operates off retail taxes. The cities do. The counties get the property tax. That's the way the state system works. And this is Durango, Colorado's property tax model. Notice downtown popping up. So what's great for Main Street is incredible for the city, or is good for the city, but it's unbelievable for the county. How often does your county step in and fix Main Street in downtown? You know, yet the county's getting all of this wealth out of it. This South Durango part here is where the mall and the Home Depot is out here. I hope I'm not talking too fast for you. Okay. This is the retail tax model. This is Durango. Look at the retail tax in downtown. It's killing it. Total productivity, jobs. You can model this stuff so people can see it and then make an informed decision off what's happening in your community. But what I love about Durango is we had these 2 business owners that wanted an apples to apples comparison of retail. So Tim and Peter have a bookshop and a coffee shop. They're kind of freaky people. They're Coloradans. They're a little bit quirky. I love that Peter likes talking about honey and Tim's got like all this crazy stuff in the coffee shop that he's selling too. They're entrepreneurs. So here's their footprint of the 2 businesses. This is the retail tax or the property tax production of the 2 small retail shops versus the Walmart. This is the retail tax production. This is the jobs. So when you look at these 2 small entrepreneurs, who would have thought that, what is that, 7 times the property tax production, 15 times the retail tax production? How many times the jobs? You know, you look at this data, which one's giving you more wealth in your community? The right side or the left side? It's easy economics, right? Let's ask the next level of economics. Who's hiring the local website designer, the local attorney, the local ad executive? The right side or the left side? Now let's talk about the social effect. Who's sponsoring this event? Who's sponsoring a Little League team? Who's being part of the system in your community? The right side or the left side? This isn't to vilify the chains. This is to understand that they have maximized their economic opportunity. Are we stepping up to that same level of challenge? The data is there to prove it, right? Are we doing all right? It's kind of hard to tell from the audience here. You guys are like crashing on sugar or something. So we have to know where the money's made and how we're making our money in our community. The data is there to show this. So for y'all, we did your model of your county. First of all, we had to figure out you're very much a Midwestern community. You're very far before you get to other big cities. Fargo is a very large place at 200,000. And so basically it's looking at your models nearby, it's a completely different pattern of growth than what we're used to on the East Coast or the West Coast. Your tax system is different. It's not that different, but we're a bunch of people from North Carolina. We have to figure this out. Incidentally, these are all the states and how they operate at a local level. When I say local, I'm saying city and county combined, because this is where you have your control. So if you're on this side of the spectrum, red is property taxes, so these states operate more at a property tax level. If you're on this end of the spectrum, you're operating more with the green stuff, which is retail tax. Alabama, Louisiana, and Arkansas operate more with retail tax. Not a good way to run a local environment, because what happens in COVID, what happens when there's an economic downturn? You don't buy that boat, you don't buy the TV, so all of a sudden you can't afford your cities. Why they do that, I don't know, but that's how they chose their system. Y'all are kind of in the middle. You're mostly property tax based, which is good because that's more of your local control, it's your land value, but as you heard from Chuck earlier, you're also giving away the farm a little bit by doing these tax holidays and special districts and all sorts of other ways where you're basically not getting that revenue to pay for your infrastructure. But anyway, for us, we have to learn how this operates. This is the way our tax system operates. We have a market value. It gets assessed down. We're pretty much 100% market to assessed value. And then we have our tax rate. That's the only thing we control in North Carolina is our percent millage rate. For y'all, you have a couple steps. You have a 50% assessment. You have that 2-year holiday. And you also you have your assessment factor and mill rate that you can control. This is a really crude way of looking at it. But basically, you're assessing 50% of both commercial and residential. Some states, they assess them differently. Colorado, they assess commercial 3 times the residential rate. But if you had $100,000 worth of value, the assessed value would be 50-50. Now, when you add in those, the homestead credit, that drops it down. So just to be fair, your homeowners get a TIF, right? It's a tax break. Just call it what it is. Let's be honest. And we should talk to citizens about that and just say, when you complain about somebody's project downtown, having a special assessment or a TIF, realize that we all get a TIF by owning a house. So that's the reality of your system. So you have an assessment factor that's different in the two. Or another way of looking at it, commercial pays about 10% more on $100,000 worth of value. That's just a really simple way of looking at the data, right? So from your model standpoint, this is Cass County is a total value, so miles per tank. You see the big hot parcels along the highway because they're super valuable. This is value per acre. Now you see a heat shift in Fargo, and this is it in 3D right here. Let's kind of zoom in to the community. So we worked on Castleton, West Fargo, and Kindred. You can kind of see how West Fargo and Fargo are kind of like clones of each other. They both have a spike in the downtown, but they both slide southward with this big carpet of yellow stuff. And then very, very much who you are. You travel a long way until you get to the villages around you. This is Kindred. We'll come back to this in a second. This is Castleton. You can see a bigger spike in its downtown in Castleton because something's going on Main Street a little bit better. This is West Fargo. You can see the lights, and you can also see up there the Cheyenne project up in downtown, up on Cheyenne Street. But generally, the sprawl is what it is. From a taxable, non-taxable standpoint, you want to have these simple metrics in your community. Just understand what's taxable and non-taxable. The county is about 4%. That's a little on the low side, but you're farming, so you take up a lot more of your county. My county is 30% non-taxable. We have a lot of forests that we don't go into. The cities of West Fargo and Fargo are 38% and 29% non-taxable. There's no magic number here, it's just be aware of what it is. Typically cities with universities in it consume more land, take it off the tax rolls, but it should just treat it as precious, particularly when you get in your downtown. When you get into the towns, you're looking at 11% at Kindred and 21% at Castleton. So this is just some basic facts of these places. We always start with the ingredients of a city. Everybody's got, well, not everybody, but most places have a Walmart. So we grab it as a control subject. So your Walmart's pulling about $500,000 of value per acre. Let's just call it $500,000, right? That's its production at a property tax level. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that on every slide going forward, so it's down in the lower level over here, just so you can see other land uses adjacent to that. So when you look at county single family is almost double a Walmart in production. Are y'all aware of that? So that's what's going on here, which is pretty cool. If you look at the sample of Kindred, Castleton, and West Fargo, you can see the spread from $400,000 an acre to 1.1 million. When you get into multifamily, let's go back. Single family is 1.2 million, multifamily is 1.6 million. So multifamily is more productive than single family. So when people say multifamily is bad, multifamily is a criminal element, all these other biases that they have, start people with their money. What's going on from a financial standpoint? But when you look at the different towns, West Fargo's doing it pretty good at 1.7 million per acre for multifamily. There's a term called missing middle. Do y'all know, you've heard about this. This is basically a planner's way of talking about what we used to do before we've made it illegal. It's that middle ground stuff of townhouses and things like this. These are in Fargo. I love those Arlington apartments. So those things are 100 years old. I mean, check this out. $3.3 million an acre of value. And even I guess that'd be called is that the Barker or Baker apartments? Bakeray? I don't know what you call that, but that's $2 million an acre. Think of the wealth that these things produce, and they've been doing it for 100 years. This is tax production in your community. Are these legal to do? This used to be part of the way that we built cities back in the day. This was commonplace in most cities. Your commercial lands, Kmart, 400,000, Minyards, 800,000. Okay, this is the primo one. West Acres Mall coming in at 1.4 million. Walmart at 500,000. 1.4 million for the mall, 3.3 million for the Arlington apartments. Y'all follow me? That's twice the production of the West Acres Mall. So know these numbers and talk about it. Then you get into the firm, now we're at 10 million of value production. 10.1 million, or it's called 11 million for the Cheyenne Plaza in West Fargo. That's awesome. It's an incredible bump in the valuation. And remember, Walmart's 500,000. Block 9 at 54 million, and the Radisson at 77 million. I was talking with Sean and the governor about this, and we were having a conversation about the Radisson coming in at number 1. The quirk on why the Radisson is coming in at number 1 is because it's not seen as attached to that parking deck. They're two separate parcels. But the Radisson's production is due to a couple of things. One, it's a very dense building. It also takes over part of the street up there. So it's got tax value over a street that's not technically its parcel. It's over the right-of-way. But when you add the parking deck, to be fair, because the parking deck is in the block 9, they actually shift. And so the block is actually the most potent building in Cass County at 54 million versus the Radisson at 34 million. Do y'all follow me on this? This is the production and growth that you're growing in your community. These are county taxpayers as much as they're city taxpayers, and in both cases, they're also downtown business improvement district taxpayers. So just to show you that it's not all big buildings that are productive, this is a little 4-story job on Broadway coming in at 21 million an acre. So don't think that you have to do very, very tall buildings to be productive. You can have smaller buildings that are productive. It's design and density that drive that valuation. So getting into land uses, just to highlight some of the examples in the communities, we've got just stepping outside of downtown, going up next to the campus, you can see this little orange spike right here. That's 5.4 million for those apartments that college students live in. Down in Kindred, that little bank building right there, this is $1 million. This is double of Walmart's production right here in Kindred. And then up there, you get this bank building coming in at 5 million in Castleton. So these aren't like massive pieces of New York architecture that are dropping in. These are little hometown, small town types of development that produce wealth. This is when you get into West Fargo, the Lights, which is down here, the Cheyenne Plaza, which is that purple spike, and then that's the Radisson before the parking garage is put in, just to show you where these are. We'll have this all as a PDF file for you all, but also this is on tape so you can steal these images. Zooming into the campus for a second, one of the things to pay attention to is your taxable, non-taxable. That whole pad right there of that surface parking, the college is just using it, or the university is just using it as a big parking lot. That's an amazing amount of real estate that's not paying taxes. And to show you the difference, look at the model. We just left the apartments standing side by side with the surface parking lot. Look at the potency of those two buildings. Yet y'all are wasting all of that real estate for commuter traffic and piling snow on it. Is that the best use of your land, and can you do something better? Obviously, you can get some value out of that with the housing. So that was kind of interesting to look at. Some other metrics to pay attention to. We always talk about, when you look at your portfolio analysis of your community, have some simple metrics. What's your impact in your tax production? So the city of Castleton is less than 0.1% of area of Cass County. It's producing about 0.4% of Cass County property taxes, right? Those don't look like big numbers, but when you do the math on that, it's like a 1-to-4 ratio of area to value production. Does that make sense? Do y'all follow me? It's 4 times the potency of its footprint. When you look at Castleton's downtown to Castleton, the downtown takes up less than 1%, is producing 2% of the city's taxes, the downtown is. So that's a 1-to-3 ratio of productivity. That's pretty good. We generally recommend a 1-to-6 level, so downtown should be growing up more than what it is. There's more work to do here. But let's not forget that downtown is a piece of the county, remember? Barely shows up. I don't even know what you call that as a number, like 1/1000% of footprint, and 2/100% of value. That's a 1-to-19 ratio of productivity for the county. That's really strong value for the county. So the counties should be out working with you all and helping you all build your downtowns. They're gonna see some value growth out of that. Y'all follow me? It's a fertile territory to grow wealth for everybody. Cities and counties need to work together. What I found when I was on our downtown association, we treated the county like an enemy, like they were against us, and they commensurately treated us back as an enemy. We weren't working together. And it was because we weren't sharing information to see how the wealth could be shared. And that you have to open those doors and have that conversation. So when you look at the numbers of the downtowns to the cities, Kindred's doing something all right. You're getting a 1-to-5 ratio value for your downtown to your city, which is pretty good. And Fargo is doing better than West Fargo. So there's more room to go in West Fargo to grow your downtown up, but you all know that. You're kind of getting it going now. So just some, I'm just gonna go through a couple of these. It's hard to show these numbers this time of the day. You guys, it's been a long day. But I'll save these for you for later. But this is the population difference, the area difference, the total value, the density, and the average value per acre of Kindred versus Castleton. We're trying to find some way to compare the cousins against each other. And when you look at the situation here, you're looking at double the density from Castleton to Kindred. So Castleton's double the density, and it's 3 times the potency. So Kindred, you can learn from what Castleton is doing. Some of this is due to the fact that if you look at the top of Kindred, they've annexed a bunch of land that really doesn't contribute a lot to the community. Maybe slow it down a little bit on the annexation, Kindred. You don't need all that real estate. So just be aware of that because that liquidates your value. When you get into West Fargo versus Fargo, y'all are kind of close to each other from a density standpoint, from a value standpoint, but when you look at the peak of the model, this is where Fargo starts to walk away. It's 7 times the potency of West Fargo. So Fargo has got a head start on its downtown versus West Fargo, and that work should be shared. Back to Kindred for a second. Did y'all notice this little thing over here? This weird area to the right? We'll come back to that in a second. Here's the downtown. Here's what's going on in the downtown. $500,000 an acre. It's pulling more than a Walmart at the Springbrook's and Tavern building. But then you find something like this big pad right here at 45,000. This is your opportunity. Do what you can to change this. This is 10 times the potency across the street from this. This is where there's small little moves. You can just do that surgery locally. So that's what you've got going on. It's just your typical little farm town. The building on the right is a little funky. It's one of those old bank buildings that's been glommed on. There's like a Halloween store and a liquor store there or something. But it's pulling 500,000. That's about a Walmart's production on the right. But this thing, did y'all know this? This was kind of freaky to us. There's this airport community thing here. There's literally a subdivision built on an airport. Did y'all know this? These people have, look at these houses right here. They have a front driveway and a back driveway that goes to an alley so people can drive their airplane to the airport. I guess y'all have airplanes here or something? It's a joke. But it exists. Did y'all know this? So clearly a wealthy community, right? If you have an airplane in your house. So we figured, well, let's take a look at those houses and compare them against the old part of Kindred and do some stats. So on the right, 108 houses. So there you are. Check this out. Double the amount of acres for the right community versus the left community. When you look at the value per acre, so take the whole value and divide it by its acres, it's about the same as 600,000. How is it that this wealthy community is the same production as the old part of town? When you look at, here's where it starts to get kind of scary, what Chuck talked about this morning. Look at the streets. You have 1.5 miles of streets here versus 1.1, but the streets are 30 feet wide versus 24. So width times length equals area, right? You have 238,000 square feet of roads on the right versus 139 on the left. So even though you're getting the same value production, the same taxes per acre, you're paying double the cost on the right versus the left. Is that a good deal? It's going to cost you almost twice as much to plow that. It's going to cost you almost twice as much to replace it, yet your revenue is absolutely identical. Do y'all follow me? Talk this through. Is this a good deal? Don't just say, oh, these people have planes. That's awesome. I want to be their friend. That's not the way to make economic decisions. Run the numbers and figure out if this is good wealth building for your community. I hope none of y'all are the plane people in the audience. I'm just taking a little risk here. Not that I'm against it. It's just understand the numbers. So Castleton, this is the downtown, 1.6 million, 1.2 million, 5 million. There's some good production in this town because they've kept the main street intact. That's growing wealth. This is 1.6 million an acre, or 3 times a Walmart. This little guy is 4 times a Walmart. Who would have thought? Don't believe your eyes when you just walk by a building and say, oh, it's a throwaway steel building. It actually could be productive. This is the $5 million value per acre right here, 10 times a Walmart. And so here's the city. And then this is something interesting we saw down here. 2 sides of a street. Notice how one side's up higher than the other side? Here's what's going on. Same linear feet of street. So that's the same street, 1,900 feet of street. On one side, you have an average value of 1.2 million. On this side of the street, it's 900,000. So with the same infrastructure cost, you have 2 wildly different tax productions on either side. There's a cash flow there, right? What's coming out of those buildings, and is it paying for that physical infrastructure? Pay attention to that stuff. And West Fargo, doing some awesome stuff. You've got the lights building. Incidentally, I was kind of a little disappointed, no offense, West Fargo, but just to be taken around this project and celebrated and hear the pride in this project and the streets that you all built, and then right across the street was a Dollar General. Why? if you're going to make that kind of investment, make sure that you have like a 2-drink minimum or something, that there's a base level of investment that happens commensurate with your investments, or at least talk about it and say, look, we did something wrong. We're going to learn from it. We're not going to do that again. How do we work with our zoning or our other economic incentives so that we don't do that again? Learn from this stuff. But this is an incredible investment. Celebrate it. Obviously, the Cheyenne Plaza at $10.8 million, doing awesome. And the Pioneer Place right adjacent to it. So we just went ahead and compared Pioneer Place to the mall. And you need 14 acres of the building on the left to equal the building on the right. So this is the footprint difference between the two. And you basically need that much of the building on the left to equal that much of the building on the right. Do y'all follow me? So think about the amount of frontage that you have on the building on the right versus the building on the left, yet you're getting the same money out of it. So this is how we're bleeding ourselves dry out of these small little cuts that happen all over our community because we're not paying attention to this stuff. So your downtown is super awesome. You've got these buildings. You've come a long way from what you used to have. Measure what you used to have and just show this to your citizens so they're aware of the economic effect of what's happened. Don't just talk about, oh, we don't like the fact that there's a band that shows up every once in a while. That's the politics of it. Show the community what they've got out of it from a value standpoint so everybody's aware that you're building wealth because you're doing a great job in this location. Okay, just to go into the close, lots of times people respond to our data and say, you just want big buildings everywhere. You keep on showing us big buildings. You couldn't be any further from the truth. We did Gwinnett County, Georgia, and I don't know if you know Gwinnett County, Georgia. Lawrenceville's the county seat. I had never been there when we did the analysis, but we found this awesome little building called Doug's Boots. Doug's Boots is 12 feet wide. It's pulling $400,000 of value per acre. And when you see these little buildings, oftentimes we go by them because they have a value it's really only worth $24,000. That's Doug's Boots. This is another one called the Bench Jeweler that's like 8 feet or 11 feet wide. And my favorite was the Bath Body Bar, that green awning right there. The building's 7 feet wide. These, when you look at the tax rolls, this is what you see: 17,000, 12,000, and 24,000. But they're tiny, tiny footprints. Per acre, they're crushing it. 400,000, 1.2 million, and 1.7 million. Do y'all follow me? If you had 80 acres of Doug's Boots, it would equal the 113-acre mall. Little things can have tremendous impact. Don't ignore that. This is a building in Peoria. Y'all see it? Gary Morris's kind of shoved between the parking deck. Gary was the city attorney, and I guess he got chased out of City Hall. And so he hung a shingle and created a law office between the parking deck and this building. So there's Gary Morris's office, $3.2 million of value per acre. A little law office. It's actually almost as productive as that skyscraper at 3.3 million. Look at the numbers, understand the potency. Is it that hard to make another Gary's Law office in some alley somewhere? No. Do little things. This is the Skinny Building in Boston, built after Civil War. It's 7 feet wide at the front, 10 feet at the back. $62 million of value per acre for over 100 years. This is a building in Alexandria, Virginia. It was built as a dollhouse for that building right there for the two daughters. The two daughters got older. One of them left and got married. The other one stayed home and moved into the dollhouse, and it's been there ever since. It's smaller than a smart car, and it's $64 million of value per acre. The thing is 356 square feet. Now, I wouldn't live in that. There was a time in my life when I would have, but there's places in your market for small investments for people that may want this. Cultivate these. So, speaking of you all, just around the train station in Fargo, at the intersection of Broadway and Main and 8th Street, there are these guys. Y'all know these buildings? They're tiny. They're pulling $2.2 million of value per acre, and they've been doing it for 100 years. Did y'all know that? I mean, you drive by them and they just don't look important, but they're actually incredibly productive. Very small spaces that small entrepreneurs can lease up cheaply and start businesses. That's a pretty cool thing. I was thinking, well, do small buildings and small incremental development, does it work in North Dakota? Yeah, totally. Could say you betcha, right? So you want to know the policies and how things operate? This is one of the things that we see in every community. And this is why I went to the Assessors Conference. Actually, Chuck and I both went. And we presented this. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming. You've got land value, you've got buildings on top of the land, right? We can go into the computer and just turn off buildings and look at the dirt value per acre. When I was presenting this in Cheyenne, Wyoming, notice in the upper right how everybody's blue up there? Everybody's the same dirt value per acre is about 15,000. When you go over here and notice on the mall area over there, the dirt under the mall is $15,000 an acre. When you cross the street, it doubles in value. And I asked the assessor, I asked the community, I said, why does land double in value when you cross the street? The assessor raised her hand and she goes, you don't understand. And I said, what am I missing? She goes, well, it's got a bigger parcel. The bigger the parcel, the lower the land value. Did you all know that? The bigger the parcel, the cheaper the dirt. So I asked the assessor, I said, you've got 3 miles of infrastructure around the property. The person across the street's got 200 feet. And she said, we don't count the infrastructure as part of the valuation. So let that wash over you. The money that you put into the ground isn't part of the value because they're looking at transactions or income and commercial property. They're not looking at infrastructure. The mayor just started laughing. I'm like, really, you're just have more dirt, more infrastructure, and that's the way you assess it. And she said, well, that's the way our standard is. So I went to the Assessors Conference and asked them. Their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. I said, is this fair and is it equitable? Now, in the defense of the assessors, what they said was quite amazing. They said, it's not. I'm like, really? And I said, where did this standard come from? Did Moses deliver this to you? Like, where'd this? And they said, well, that's cute, Joe. By the way, they thought this was hilarious. And they said, you need to talk to Larry Clark. So I go talk to this guy, Larry. I mean, literally, you just have to meet Larry. I talked to Larry Clark, and he goes, yeah, we probably need to change that. So think about standards that get put in place and ask questions. So it's not to vilify the assessors. Once it was put in front of them, they're just like, yeah, we probably need to change it. But this is going to affect the market dynamics of what's happening in your community. Have a conversation about it. Talk to your assessors. Understand what's happening. So this is your land value model. You can see that you have some of it where there's the smaller parcels are more potent than the bigger parcels behind them. And it's just a function of land economics, but understand whether or not this is the policy that you want. Talk with your assessors about where the leverage is and where the leeways are, but you have to be on the same page with them. With the way that you use land, there's a couple other policies I want to talk about. One is brought up several times today, is parking. This is Indianapolis, Indiana, Marion County. This is how the buildings that they have countywide. This is the surface parking. So you're looking at about 30% surface parking of how they use land countywide in Indianapolis. Or let's do it a different way. This is the county. Here's how they use the county. Roads, buildings, parking, everything else, berms, buffers, farms, parks, whatever. This is the water. When you look at the cash flow, this is the cash flow. Any planners in the audience? We have this term called logical rational nexus, the connection of policy to use. We know who uses roads, right? That would be called cars. We know who uses parking. That would be called cars. Notice how they're the same land area, but look at the value difference. That's the subsidy to parking. Your roads cost, in their case, $17 billion. They're only getting $500 million of value out of the parking. That missing 17 billion is being robbed out of your building fund to pay for those roads. Are you aware of that? That's the invisible exchange of subsidy for that use of infrastructure, period. Put it on a piece of paper, have a discussion about it. So here's the way that their system works. That's Marion of Marion County. There she is. The average Marion County resident has 1,200 square feet of buildings, 800 square feet of parking, 900 square feet of roads, right? When it gets built, the assessor puts value on it. The buildings are pulling $52 a square foot on average, parking 75 cents. The roads are going to cost you $22 a square foot in front of that building and $22 a square foot in front of the parking, right? Same cost, different revenue streams. So the building is paying 71 times more taxes for the same piece of infrastructure. Just for fun, we do a lot of work with strong towns, and we asked Chuck, we're like, how long does a road last? And he said about 50 years. So we took half the taxes and put it into a savings account to see how long it would take the building to pay off the road and the parking. It takes 42 years for the building. It takes 3,000 years for the parking to pay off the road. Did you all do this math? Is this depressing yet? we need to be doing this math to understand this stuff, and don't overthink it. Have a conversation. Is this the best policy? So the other thing that we saw in the city, who owns cars? This is data you can pull straight out of the census tract. Now, we're talking Indianapolis here. I'm not talking San Francisco. These are the households with no cars, 1 car, 2 cars, and 3 cars per household. That's their data. So when you look at the data, 60% or 50% of Marion County residents have 1 car or less per household. When you look inside the bus rapid transit corridor, you're looking at 60%. So inside the community, not everybody has a car. Why do you require 2 parking spaces per residential unit when your data says not everybody has a car? And again, I'm not talking Boston here. This is Indianapolis. So look at your data in your communities. The governor talked about it earlier. Understand your census information and what you have in your community. Don't require stuff that you don't need. That's going to put cost on the cost of housing. From the infrastructure standpoint, understand what's going on with the cost of infrastructure versus revenue. And I'll show you an example because Tristan brought it up earlier. It was Lancaster, California, which is outside of Los Angeles here. This is their production model. You can see where their downtown is, where they did that Main Street. But the thing that really scared us was the amount of roads that they have. They have 953 miles of roads. That equals a road from Los Angeles to Portland. So for the engineers in the room, y'all know this, every 50 years you have to rebuild that road. That is the animal of infrastructure. It doesn't go away. So this is what it looks like. Oh, sorry, finance officers. Are there any finance officers in the room? None? When you talk to your finance officer, they follow a municipal finance standard that the Government Finance Officers Association puts out. They list roads as assets. Did y'all know that? So when Chuck and I were doing this project in Lafayette, Louisiana, we talked with the finance officer, and I said, Lori, look, my computer's an asset. If I had delivery vehicles in my business, that's an asset. If I had a piece of real estate like a hot dog stand, those are assets. I can sell you my computer, my truck, and my building. Can you pick your roads up, and can you sell them to Baton Rouge? And she said no. And Chuck goes, that's a liability. And she goes, but our CAFR standards, we have to follow these. And we're like, no, that's not the way that money works. So what happens when we have assets? If I own this mall and I had to replace the air conditioners, I know that those air conditioners need to be replaced. They have a life cycle, and they cost me about $85,000 a pop, right? I need to get a crew out there for $35,000, and I will get a sky crane. To maintain that mall, I have to constantly do that every 15 to 20 years. So I need to have $200,000 in a reserve account to pay for that in the future. I can't just wake up 20 years into the future and just write a check for $200,000. I have to build that wealth, right? Roads are the same way. Roads have a cost and they have a revenue stream. You have to pay attention to the revenue stream that comes adjacent to the road, or the cost of the road to the paltry revenue stream that comes out of that. There is a direct relationship there. You need to understand your money. So this is the road that gets built. These are the numbers for South Bend, Indiana. Once the road's built, you're paying an ongoing maintenance charge every single year. You're also paying every 10 years, you're doing a millage or rehab, and that's gonna cost you for 4 cycles. In the 5th cycle, you have to pay for a rehab. Once that rehab's done, you get to start all over again. It's about $1 million a mile of ongoing maintenance. When you look at a road, you should be penciling that out into your system to see if you can afford it. You can pay for a special assessment now. It's not gonna pick up that next rehab. You have to get that money from somewhere. So we did this analysis in Lancaster. Here's when they built all of their roads from the early 1900s to today. This is the lane miles that they built. Think about your city doing the same thing. Look what they did in 1953 right here. That's the miles of road that they built in 1953. That was replaced in 1983. Now, when their community was hit by that huge expense, they annexed more land and built more roads right there. Well, guess what? This comes back with the second rebuild and brings along with it the new stuff. We stopped them in 2016 and just said, what do you cash flow like for your roads? This is their build-rebuild schedule for all their roads, not adding any more roads into the future. So we can look back at this now and see how crazy that first wave is. And then they went ahead and repeated that and did it all over again. Now remember, we're not adding another road and look at how it's getting bigger and bigger. Not to freak out anybody under the age of 40, but you should be freaked out. This is going to be our ongoing problem for the millennial generation. Our parents' generation didn't do the right thing and put themselves on a diet. We just doubled down on the same problem. This is what our generation is facing. My generation and younger. This stuff isn't going away. We just did this big experiment in the 1930s or 1950s and just kind of threw a Hail Mary pass. We need to change this paradigm. We flush their money into the system, they can only afford 50% of their roads. There's no way around this. So think about this. You have to bring that long-term obligation into today's dollars so people understand that that special assessment isn't going to work. But it's our habit. This is an American thing of hoping somebody else is going to solve this problem. So last example, and I'll stop. I feel like I'm being a little rude here. I'm beating you all up over this. But this is Eugene, Oregon. This is looking at the cost and revenue of an entire city. What's above the water line is the money. What's below the water line is the cost. So if we treat this like a revenue model or a business, does the development pattern pay for its infrastructure, its roads, its water, its sewer? So you net the green against the red. This is what's in the black and what's net subsidized. So looking at the top of the model, you can see how well downtown does. And if you lift this model up like you're looking for a salamander under a rock, this is the spread of subsidy across the model. This is Eugene, Oregon, with a growth boundary, and they're very green-minded, environmentally minded, and you can see how they're bleeding out. These are their building types. We call this the Brady Bunch slide. You have residential across the top, mixed income in the middle, commercial on the bottom, and then low density, medium density, high density, and these are the sticker prices. When I was presenting this to the community, I knew what the problem was. Politically, I've just shown that the majority of people in this room live in a single-family house. It's a reality of politics. And I just proved and shown that their numbers, the majority of the audience, is being subsidized. We've all been given this deal. So be honest with ourselves and say, is it worth it? Is this the best use of $1,400 an acre per house type? Could that money go elsewhere? Is that the subsidy that we really need? And certainly don't subsidize 80% of your business that way. So you got to balance it out. So balance out your city like you're balancing out a section of your diagram of what you are. So for them, do stuff downtown, but also do stuff like up at the top up here, this Crescent Village. Maybe find 4 areas to grow up your wealth so you can afford your community. And then also one last example is the pipes. Engineers in the audience, this is a sewer system map. Each of these colors is its own system of trunk lines. When we asked the engineer, we said, how much does everybody pay per gallon of flush? And he goes, everybody pays the same per gallon of flush in the whole city, because that's fair, right? If you look up here at the top, the beige area up the top, see those pink boxes that are up there? Those are all lift stations where you're lifting sewerage uphill. Those are super expensive pieces of equipment. They cost $1 million a pop. They cost $50,000 a year to maintain those each. So that's $20 million of infrastructure that the top neighborhood has that the bottom neighborhood doesn't. That's a subsidy, right? They're subsidizing that neighborhood $20 million of service, extra service that nobody else gets. Should that be a decision that the engineer makes? Or should the community make it? But at least write it down so that people are aware of that subsidy. So when we don't have money for the art teacher, the greenway, or the dancing traffic cop, it's not that you don't have that money, it's that we've blown it in other systems of development. So, okay, I've beaten y'all up. I know that this is depressing, but there are ways out of this. So I'll give you 5 lessons. One is learn from each other, steal examples from each other, learn when you make a mistake and what you can do better. All of this stuff is transferable. And experiment, do little experiments. Know your costs and map them. I've given you a lot of information. Take it and go with it. This is a great example of don't just see the revenues without understanding the comparison of how it fits in with other parts of the community. It's actually more beneficial for the stuff on the left than the right. But people may say, I want to have a big yard and I want to have a big house. Great, you should be paying for your street too. So at least figure that out. Thicken up. Chuck talked about this earlier. Find that existing infrastructure. Use that more before you build up other stuff. This is an example right here in Kindred to take from. Obviously, West Fargo is doing this. Do more of it, West Fargo, but continue the dialogue. Big things come in small packages. The little guys are awesome. Do little buildings like this. They're very potent. They're also easy and cheap for small entrepreneurs to build and also inhabit. So find more ways to make these happen. Don't take big gambles. Understand your choices are all conscious or unconscious. The fact that the engineer was in charge of the pricing without having the dialogue publicly, that was a subsidy to that neighborhood. Final point, for anybody that cares about the planet, why would you have to lift sewerage uphill? It's built in a wetland. They should have never built out there in the first place. So it's subsidizing something that's actually harming the planet on top of it. So again, these are choices that we're making by not paying attention to them. And with that, we call this geo-accounting. You're just putting numbers on a map to see what's going on. And like your accountant, this isn't about biases. This is about the honest math of what's going on. So your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. So put this information out so that the politicians, the elected community leaders, and residents can understand what's happening with their choices. And with that, we do it visually because the maps have meaning. You've sat through a lot of slides. I'm sorry I dragged you through so much. I want you to see this information and know that you can do things with it. Also read Chuck's books. I know that he's going to be doing a talk tonight on the second book. A lot of this information is in there. Share that with your elected officials. Strong Towns does a great job putting that information out. And thanks for letting me do some math.
Awesome. Good job. Good job.